What's up, guys? I'm back with another video, and today I wanted to discuss the first few games of the James Harden era in Philadelphia. I know we're only 4 games in, but there's been a lot of things that I really like and some things that I haven't liked so much. But I want to start with the positives. And the biggest plus that I've seen since the arrival of James Harden is that the Sixers offense looks so much better. They're no longer going through these 5-minute stretches where they can't buy a basket. They're no longer getting stumped by zone defenses that teams love to throw at them because they have James Harden now, and he's solved a lot of their offensive problems, man. And I know there's been this misconception about James Harden throughout his career that he's an ISO-heavy player. And he was in Houston. Of course he was an ISO-heavy player, but he had to be because he was the only offensive weapon that those Rockets teams had. But in Brooklyn and now in Philadelphia, he has demonstrated that he can be the perimeter creator. He can be the primary playmaker on these teams, and he's flourishing, man. He's making everybody's life so much easier in Philly. Joel Embiid even said it, that he's never been this wide open in his career when he's playing with James Harden. And I mean, you can see it, man. Tyrese Maxey, George Niang, Matisse Thybulle even, they're all such big beneficiaries of James Harden being there because he just creates for people, man. He creates. And that two-man game with him and Joel Embiid, I know a lot of people were questioning the fit because Joel Embiid's not a lob threat like Clint Capella or Dwight Howard and those guys that James Harden used to play with. But Joel Embiid's just one of the best offensive players in this league, and you put him in any sort of two-man game with James Harden and it is a nightmare for any defense. And I mean, on paper, just think about it, like, what, as a defense, what do you do when those guys go into that two-man action? Whether it's dribble, handoff, pick and roll, you kind of got to pick your poison, because if you trap James Harden, then you have Joel Embiid wide open in the middle of the paint, and that's either 2 points or a foul every single time. He's that good. And then if you choose to switch it, then you have James Harden isolated on the big man and Joel Embiid isolated on the guard. I mean, that's just, that you never want to get into that position either, because both of those guys can ISO you to death. And then they're also just, I mean, they're both experts at getting to the free throw line. So anytime they recognize a mismatch, they're taking advantage, and that's why they're shooting so many free throws. I know people were getting a little frustrated with that, and yeah, it's not the most pretty style of basketball, but that's what they're gonna do, man. You better get used to it, because that's gonna happen more games than not. And one of the things that's flown under the radar a little bit is the amount of opportunity that it creates for the guys around them when they go into that two-man action because of the attention that they garner, man. Joel Embiid and James Harden are two of the best offensive players in the entire NBA. So naturally, all the attention from the defense is going to be on those guys. But then that leaves George Niang wide open for three, Tyrese Maxey wide open on another wing, Danny Green wide open in the corner, Matisse Thybulle cutting to the rim. It opens up so much more for these other guys. And I mean, so far Tyrese Maxey has looked like the biggest beneficiary, and I mean, he looks incredible in this role that he has now as the third guy, the third option in the offense. He looks incredible. And I mean, if he's not in your most improved player conversation, I don't know what you're thinking, man, because he's been, I mean, the dude's quick decision making is what really stands out to me. When he gets the ball, he immediately knows what to do with it, whether it's drive and get to the line or finish, because he's one of the best finishing guards in the league, I'd say. And he's so explosive too, but then he can also step back and shoot a three. He can catch and shoot a three. I mean, his three-point shooting has improved as a whole so much from last year. He was down at like 30% last year. Now he's up to over 40, and that's been such a huge help to this offense. But Tyrese Maxey is just shot out of a cannon every time he gets the ball, and he's a perfect complementary piece to James Harden and Joel Embiid, because you can't not pay attention to him, and when you don't pay attention to him, he's so good at making the defense pay. And the other guy that I think has benefited a lot from James Harden's arrival is George Niang, because he's one guy, and Danny Green, of course, but George Niang is one guy that has such a quick trigger, man. When he gets the ball, he's shooting it no matter what. I mean, he can have a defender in his face. He can be 0 of 5 from 3 prior to that. He doesn't care, and he pulls that trigger, and James Harden loves that, and him and James Harden is such a great pairing, because I mean, James Harden needs to play with guys like that are not afraid to shoot the ball no matter what, and George Niang's been shooting it damn good since he's got there. And yeah, man, I'm really impressed with what I've seen from him. And I think that down the line in the playoffs, I think, you know, depending on the matchup that the Sixers have, I think George Niang could be a great guy to fill in that 5th spot next to Tobias, Tyrese, James, and Joel, because obviously they're going to want Matisse there for defensive purposes. He's their best wing defender and all that. I get that. But offensively, if they're in a position where they don't have to really worry about any wings killing them, like a DeMar DeRozan type or a Zach LaVine or a Chris Middleton, anybody like that, then I would consider putting George Niang into that 5th spot because he is just a really, really perfect fit with those guys. So yeah, man, offensively, this fit has been a match made in heaven. I really am really impressed with what I've seen so far. And I think they're averaging over 120 points per game right now, and I really don't see that number coming down. They're just such a dynamic offense with James Harden and Joel Embiid out there, two of the best offensive minds in the entire NBA. And yeah, they're going to be a problem offensively. But the one thing that I haven't liked so far, or at least the biggest thing I should say, is that Tobias Harris, man, he kind of looks lost out there at times, and he's had a down year in general. He hasn't been great this year. And, you know, since James Harden's got there, it's not like he's not getting the opportunities to score, because he is. He's getting put in these very prime positions to score for him, whether it's catch and shoot or positions where he can just drive to the basket. But his decision making, which is very, you know, opposite of Tyrese Maxey's, his decision making is very poor. He's getting the ball and kind of doesn't know what to do with it at times. I mean, he'll be wide open from three and just pause and like hesitate, like, dude, just shoot the ball, but he doesn't know what to do with it. And then he's having these awful turnovers, and you add on top of that the fact that he can't make an entry pass to Joel Embiid to save his life, and then you got Joel Embiid over there looking at him like, dude, can you get me the ball? Like, what the hell? And I mean, that's all Tobias Harris, honestly. That's just him. You know, I don't think it's more, I think it's less about the fit with them than it is about just him and all this mental stuff that he's dealing with. I think it's all mental at the end of the day. But the fact that he's getting paid over $30 million per year, it's crazy, man. He doesn't look like he's worth anything near that, and it's really sad because I like Tobias. He's a good guy and all that, but he doesn't look like he's really fitting with this team right now well at all. And I like I said, I don't think it's more fit. I just think it's him. And I wouldn't be surprised if next year he wasn't on this team. It's going to be hard to find a suitor for his big contract, but he really looks useless out there at times, man. And that's not anything I'd ever think I would say, but it's the truth. So that's my biggest cause for concern right now is just Tobias Harris. He's not playing well at all. But the other thing I would say, and I think is going to get fixed over time, but when Joel Embiid has the ball in the post, and this was something that I heard a lot of people talk about early on before we even got to see it in action, but when Joel Embiid has the ball in the post, James Harden can't be, you know, out of the play. He's got to be in a position where he's close to Joel Embiid or one or two passes away so that he can get the ball and just drive in. Because teams are going to double Joel Embiid regardless of if James Harden's on the court. But when he is getting doubled, James Harden has to be in a position to take advantage of that. And when he's all the way on the other side of the court, I just don't think that that's the case, you know, because then when the ball gets to him, the offense kind of resets and then he goes into his ISO, which is not a bad possession because James Harden ISOs, you know, they work. But I think to maximize the potential of a Joel Embiid post-up with James Harden on the floor, you have to have him either one or two passes away so he can just get the ball and go. I think that's what they need to do. And one other thing, this goes back to the Tobias Harris point, but Doc Rivers we can't see any more Tobias Harris post-up isolations. We can't see that. Number one, it's not a high percentage look because half the time he's posting up on a guy that is his size and he's not strong enough to just discard those guys. So he's taking these tough turnaround shots, and I'm like, dude, you have James Harden and Joel Embiid on the court. If you're gonna ISO, give it to them. I'd rather that than you throw it to Tobias and have him post up because it's never really a high percentage look unless he has somebody that's half his size on him. But yeah, that needs to be cut out of the offense entirely, in my opinion. And then the last thing is that Doc Rivers really needs to hold true to his statement early on of him either having James Harden and Tobias Harris on the court or Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey on the court at all times. He's got to have two of those four on the court at all times. You can't have James Harden running with, you know, George Niang and Furkan Korkmaz, Matisse Thybulle, Paul Millsap. Yeah, we've seen James Harden control a team like that before, but I mean, you have Tobias Harris there, and if he's not getting the looks he needs when Joel is on the court, then he needs to have the ball in his hands when he's off the court, and I think that's best for him. And then those lineups with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey work well also, but he's got to have two of those four on the court at all time, in my opinion, for this to work to the best that it can. But yeah, man, I really overall, I would say that I really like what I've seen. And yes, it's very early, and they only have 20 games to work this out. Like James Harden said, you know, after 20 games, shit gets real. So they need to figure this out now. And I'm not really worried about it. I really think they will get it figured out. And I think that right now this would be my pick to get out of the Eastern Conference. You know, earlier on I was going to say Milwaukee, but I do think that once this offense gets completely figured out, it's going to be too hard for teams to stop. And the defensive issues, yeah, they're still going to be there because, you know, they're not a great defensive team. But defense, I always think that defense is about effort. And in the playoffs, if this team gives the effort I know that they can, they'll be just fine on that end. So, yeah, man, I'm really excited about what the future holds with this team. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, but I want to hear what you guys think. How far do you think the Sixers can get in the playoffs? Yeah, man, let me know. Leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next vid. Peace.